Hello, my name is John Kuhl, and I'm with the Congressional Youth Leadership Council. We have 20 of our students here today for a conversation with two former members of Congress. As you know, last month was Black History Month. We therefore thought a conversation with two African-American former members of Congress would be both timely and appropriate. Our students will ask them about their experience running for office and serving in Congress, the work of the Congressional Black Caucus, and what they view as the major civil rights issues currently facing our country. This is the fourth in a series of webcasts that are part of the Civics Connection, a joint project by the Frey Institute of Government at the University of Central Florida and the U.S. Association of Former Members of Congress. These webcasts are made possible via a grant from the U.S. Department of Education and are meant to enable high school students to learn more about their government by asking questions of former legislators. We are joined by the Reverend Walter Fauntroy, who was the District of Columbia's delegate to Congress from 1971 to 1990, and by former Representative Albert Wynn, who represented Maryland as a Democrat from 1993 until 2008. I'm going to give each of them the chance to quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll open the floor for questions. Pastor Fauntroy, why don't we start with you?
Yes, I'm here to share the truth in love and to get you to face reality with courage about governance. And it's against the background of my relationship with Martin Luther King Jr., whom I represented in the Capitol here to the presidents and the leadership of the House and Senate in the decade of the 60s, while we put together the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65. As against the background of that and the fact that people around the world celebrate his birthday now, particularly his speech, "I have a dream deeply rooted in the American dream."
Congressman Wynn?
Well, I'm delighted to be here because we have young people here. And I think that's the key to our country's future, engaging more young people in the political process. I'm very honored to be here with an icon of the civil rights movement and of Congress, Reverend Fauntroy. And again, I think this is a great opportunity to talk with young people, not just to them, about how our government works, how Congress works, and some of the things we've done in the Congressional Black Caucus.
All right, great. We've divided our discussion up into three subtopics, and the first one is about caucuses and specifically the Congressional Black Caucus. So why don't we take our first question?
Hello, my name is Maria from Seminole, Florida, and my question is, what are the major achievements of the Congressional Black Caucus?
Well, I'd be very pleased. I was a founding member of the Congressional Black Caucus, and I'm proudest of how it followed up on Martin Luther King Jr.'s initiatives on voting rights. We were here because we had the Voting Rights Act, which enabled 2 million new African Americans to register and vote in the South. As a consequence, we created a situation where we began to meet the needs not only of African Americans, but all of those who were left out of the caucuses in terms of decision making in Washington, D.C.
I think I would echo what the congressman said from the standpoint of, while I was in Congress, we actually reauthorized the Voting Rights Act because it was not enough just to pass the bill, you had to enforce it. And even after the bill was passed, there were a lot of attempts to disenfranchise African Americans and other minorities to discourage them from voting. And so the Voting Rights Act was very important to allow the Justice Department to monitor and oversee what was going on in particularly racist districts, for want of a better word, to make sure that people were not discouraged from voting, even though the law allowed them to vote.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Want to take our next question?
Hi, my name is Nico from Clarion, Iowa, and my question is for Reverend Fauntroy. What drove you to want to found the Congressional Black Caucus, and what was it like to be a founding member?
First of all, I was just fascinated at the fact that the Congress was here in Washington, where I grew up, and I fell in love with the American dream. I memorized the preamble to the Constitution. I saw the documents. I remember the Declaration of Independence, and I wanted to see it work. And that's what got me into that, because I realized early on that politics determines who gets how much of what, when, and where in 5 areas. You ought to write this down. Who gets income, who gets education to earn money, who gets health care to live long enough to enjoy it, who gets housing, and who gets justice. So you can't take those things from people with impunity. That's what Jesus called the abundant life. And that's what the founding fathers called the general welfare. They said, we the people of the United States, not the kings and potentates, not the oligarchs, but we the people, in order to form a more perfect union of people, to establish justice, to provide for the general welfare. What's the general welfare? When everybody has enough income, education, health care, housing, and justice, not to bother anybody else. And I saw the caucus as the conscience of the nation, and the ones to whom Martin Luther King Jr. would have given the job of redeeming the soul of America. The soul of America is that there ought to be a place somewhere where people of every race and every creed and every color ought to enter a social contract to care for, protect, and defend one another beyond race, beyond creed, and beyond color. And the first Civil Rights Bill included not just black people, but women who were denied so many rights were included in a fashion that we're proud of the women here today and the prospects that women have now for insisting and participating in a process by which you don't pay women less than you pay men who are doing the same work.
How many members were in the original caucus?
There were 13 of us.
13, okay.
And now?
42.
42.
My.
Okay, all right. Why don't we take our next question?
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I'm from Tucson, Arizona. And my question is, how did the Congressional Black Caucus start?
Well, I'll let you take because you were there.
Yeah, that's right. Let me just take that because we were aware of caucuses. There were some 50 caucuses on Capitol Hill at the time. There was a caucus of farmers, a caucus for automakers, all of the interest that wanted a say into who got how much of what, when, and where of the money, the education, the health care, the housing, and the justice. And since we recognized as we went across the South and throughout the diaspora that people of color got the least income, education, health care, housing, and justice, we said we want to impact the process by letting people know that the American way is the best way because it creates a situation where people of every race and creed and color can work it out so that everybody has enough, that nobody is desperate. And that is how we got started. We broke up I was sharing with the congressman, we got members, 13 of us, and we decided we're not going to all be on health and human services. Some of us are going to be on armed services. Some of us are going to be on banking and community development. Others are going to be on education. Others are going to be on energy. Those kinds of things which impact the quality of life for everybody. And if we, hurting most for the lack of those things, would be leaders, then most people who are left out would be included.
Let me add a point. The caucus today also serves a political function as a dynamic, as was just stated. There are lots of caucuses. Now there are over 100 for every type of interest. And the Congressional Black Caucus is one of the largest, and it exerts political influence over the policy debates that take place in the Congress. So, for example, one of the things we're concerned about is spending on social programs to help people, to help the elderly, to help young people, on education spending, domestic spending programs for seniors. The caucus will weigh in and say, look, we want to make sure that these programs are adequately funded, and we've got 42 votes to back it up. That's what I mean when I say there's a political dimension, and that is to say that as people begin to jockey, well, what things are going to be a priority, which items are going to be passed, the caucus is able to weigh in with its point of view, its perspective, and say that we would like to bring our votes behind this type of agenda so we can influence how the decisions are made within the Congress, and that's an important role that the caucus now plays.
All right.
Thank you.
We're going to switch to our next topic now, which is Black History Month just ended, but just sort of what it was like to serve in Congress and run for Congress as an African American. So why don't we take our first question on that subtopic?
Hi, my name is Ashin. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and my only question was, I was just wondering how outside of the caucus, being African American played into other decisions and different things you guys did in Congress, and how, if it was at all a factor, your race, like being in Congress?
I think race is definitely a factor. People have talked about it's a great debate that we continue to have in this country. We've made tremendous progress, but without question, there are unique challenges as a minority, as an African American member of Congress, as an African American running for Congress. And I'll just give you one example. The question of racial discrimination comes up for my constituents, many of whom, the majority of whom are minorities, African American and Latino, as federal employees. They work within the government structure in the various agencies, and they feel they're discriminated against. Well, they bring that issue not just to the local NAACP, they also bring it to their member of Congress, and they say, as our congressman, we want you to work on these issues of discrimination in the Department of Interior, the Postal Department, Department of Agriculture, whatever governmental agency it may be. And let me assure you, it's not, I didn't want to single out those agencies. All agencies have this kind of problem. So that is one example of where race is a unique element of the work that I do as a member of Congress.
I think Martin Luther King Jr. put his finger on the significance of African American leadership when he said that we are the conscience of America, because people know deep in their hearts that the American dream was being lived out by everyone but us. We were denied income, education, health care, housing, and justice. It wasn't right. And he believed, and I do believe as well, that if you can get to the conscience of a people, they will do the right thing. And so we found, thanks to the First Amendment, and let me just explain this to you, the Founding Fathers gave us two means of influencing public policy. They said we want to give people the right to vote, to elect people who, when elected, would translate what they believed into public policy and practice. But they realized that in a one-person, one-vote democracy, the legitimate concern of any one citizen might not be addressed by that. So they gave us a First Amendment, which said that no state shall deny any citizen the right of peaceable assembly to petition the government for a change in policy. We didn't like the fact that by law, you couldn't drink water from the same fountains as other citizens who were paying taxes. You couldn't go to the same school, couldn't stay in a restaurant, couldn't go to a hotel because of the color of your skin. Not right. And people knew that deep in their hearts. And when we peaceably assembled in Birmingham, Alabama, and Bull Connor, who cooperated with us very well, he was a police chief, he said, you will not peaceably assemble here. If you stand here and exercise that right, we'll beat you with billy clubs. We'll knock you down with fire hoses. We'll bomb your churches. We said, do it in front of cameras. And they did. And it did two things. It raised public consciousness to the need for change, and eventually it pricked the conscience of enough people that by July 2nd, 1964, I sat in the White House with Martin Luther King Jr. and looked down at Johnson, who signed a piece of paper that said the policy is changed. It's changed because people vote in this country, and people have been moved to take the leadership of the conscience of the nation, which is black people, which is the caucus's mantra today.
Thank you.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Josh. I'm from Hammondsport, New York. And my question is, did you ever feel singled out being an African-American member of Congress?
You want to answer that?
Well, in some ways, yes. In some ways, yes, but not necessarily all negative ways. I think throughout my life, I've always been of the belief that it cuts both ways. Sometimes you're singled out in a favorable way, sometimes in an unfavorable way. I think a lot of times people would approach us, and I'm sure Reverend can speak to this, to solve civil rights issues that other members of Congress would not be asked to solve. I mentioned people come to me with claims about discrimination. Well, I'm not the NAACP, I'm not the government, but I'm singled out because as an African-American member of Congress and an African-American leader, that part of my responsibility is to address civil rights issues. So yes, in that sense, I would say singled out. I don't see so much of the negative singling out, but yeah, there are occasions when you have unique challenges when people call upon you to do more than just, quote, be a congressman. They want you to be a leader and address issues. They want you to go out and engage in demonstrations. When they had the controversy down in Louisiana with the high school students that were arrested unfairly, I got involved in that, although that was not a, quote, congressional issue.
I'm thinking about a song that was popular in my youth when I was your age. It was by Hoagie Carmichael. It was said, you got to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, and don't mess with Mr. In Between. I liked the fact that because we were strong on rights of citizens, we got the attention and singled out by people who were Hispanic, who were Appalachian whites, women, others who weren't getting their share. And they said, please help us. I said, I like that. And of course, I like it now because we who were the descendants of slaves are now in a situation where the most popular politician in the world is black, where the most popular movie mogul is Will Smith, who has inspired people in Tibet and in the Middle East and in Africa and in Southeast Asia, because they like to see a man in black straightening things out. The best tennis players in the world are black, two young ladies who play musical chairs at Wimbledon. The greatest brain surgeon in the world lives in his district, Ben Carson. The greatest astrophysicist in the world is a black man named Tyson, Neil Tyson, and of course the fastest fellow in the world is always black, and the NBA is nothing but Africans. In other words, I like the singling out because it points the American people in the world to the American dream, and that's why kids in Japan and in Southeast Asia, in Tibet, in Sudan, and they all know I have a dream, deep-rooted in the American dream, and it's going to be your plight and your task as young people all over this country to see to it that we live up to what we talk about, that we don't talk east and walk west, and that if Dr. King was known as the singularly most important man with the most important message for the most violent century in the history of mankind, and his message was simply this: either we learn to live together on this planet as brothers and sisters, or we'll perish together as fools. Never has that message been more important than today, and never has a generation of young people had the challenge that you have to make sure that we stop talking east and walking west, that we start being to the world what it wants us to be. This example of a place where everybody, beyond race, creed, and color, learns to work together to get 5 things for everybody.
All right, we'll take our next question.
I promise not to be as long next time.
No, it's okay, you're fine.
My name is Patrick Bartholomew from Bridgeport, Connecticut, and my question is, who would you say is the leader that inspired you the most to run for office?
Start with Congressman Wynn.
That's a good question because I've watched a lot of leaders over time. Obviously, Martin Luther King had a dramatic effect on my life, and he's been referenced a number of times in our conversations. But I was always moved by Lyndon Johnson because he was so instrumental in the civil rights movement in terms of actually signing the bill into law. I think he was a great leader. Some leaders in my own state of Maryland were very important in my decision. Malcolm X was another leader that I found to be a great motivating force. So I don't actually single out any one individual. I would say there are a lot of different leaders in different walks of life that I follow. My message, I think, to young people would be to try to emulate various leaders. I like to say, don't just latch on to one leader. Look at people who are excellent in a variety of fields and try to take the best that they bring to the table, so to speak. If it's determination, perseverance, study habits, whatever the case may be. You've heard the Reverend and how articulate he is. That's a characteristic you would want to emulate. So you find the characteristics in various people and you try to emulate those. And I think that's how you benefit from leaders, not just idolize leaders.
I'd like to try to be brief on this. I'd want each of you to take a look at a speech that Martin Luther King Jr. did on May the 17th, 1957, 3 years after the Supreme Court decision. It was entitled, "Give Us the Ballot." Give us the ballot and we will determine our fate in a community in the South. Give us the ballot and we will send to the Congress ambassadors of goodwill who will judge people not on the basis of color of skin, but the content of their needs and their participation in this process. And you read that. That's an assignment for all of you. Find that speech, read it, and you'll know why I decided I wanted to be involved in the process that results from good voting by people who want to have some domestic tranquility and not have people running around trying to take their money, their housing, their health care, and the like, but we can all get together.
All right, we're going to move on to our last topic, which is civil rights today, and what issues are facing the current Congress.
Hi, I'm Leighton Watson from Grand Rapids, Michigan. My question is, having Barack Obama in office, our first black president, has civil rights issues been brought more to the forefront now?
I would simply say that civil rights issues have become human rights issues. And that's why people all over the world look to the United States, because we dealt with the civil rights question. Now we have to, as Dr. King said, what good is it to be able to go to a restaurant and don't have the money to buy the hamburger, or to check into a hotel and don't have the money to check out? 5 things require money. You got to have money to get an education. You'll learn that. You got to have money to get health care. You got to have money to get housing. You got to have money to get justice. And I think that for that reason, people all over the world who are short of those things are saying, I hope Obama succeeds. I hope America will live out its dream so that we can live out our own. Because many of us live in countries where kings make those decisions, where oligarchs make those decisions, where dictators make those decisions, and it's not fair. Give us America. Give us the American dream. Excuse me for being so clear.
That's well put, Reverend, well put. Actually, I think civil rights has evolved. And initially there was a lot of discussion of equality in terms of public access to water fountains and restaurants and school desegregation. We're now entering an era, I think, where economic rights are beginning to take the forefront. The question becomes, what about the distribution of wealth in America? Can we address the question of poverty? Can we address the question of small business development and minority business development and women business development? And how can we make sure that everyone has a share of the economics, which is the same thing that you just heard. You need financial resources to accomplish this. Now, is that a civil rights issue? I think it is. Not in the discrimination, non-discrimination sense, but in the sense that this is an element of rights of people's lives here in America that needs to be addressed so that more people can enjoy the American dream by virtue of having economic resources. And we need to create opportunities in this country for people to have economic resources, which really gets down to something that's being talked about in Congress today, which is jobs. You have to have jobs. You have to have businesses that can create jobs. And so, yes, there are still civil rights issues. They tend to take on more of an economic tone, more so than an anti-discrimination tone in this day and age, I think.
Thank you.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Francine and I'm from Puerto Rico, and I wanted to know, based on your background, have you found yourself defending other rights aside from African Americans, and if so, what are they?
Was that other races or other rights?
No, other rights.
For other minorities?
Yeah, for other minorities.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think one of the things that occurs is because as African Americans, as Black Americans, we have gone through a civil rights struggle for equality. We can understand the struggles that women experience in terms of equal pay, which was referenced earlier. We also are sympathetic to the struggle of people with, in terms of gay rights. We also are sensitive to the issues of all minorities and their right to participate fully and have the same access to the American dream as everyone else. That's what we're pursuing. And by virtue of experiencing discrimination, we can observe discrimination and work toward correcting it.
We just know how it feels to be denied income, education, health care, housing, and justice. And therefore, we don't believe any citizen of any race, any creed, any color, any sexual preference should be denied income on basis of what they are and what they believe. Education, health care, housing, and justice. And that makes us the leader for people who are considered the least of these around the world.
Thank you very much. We have about 5 minutes left, and so we wanted to close by asking each of you, what was your personal biggest achievement from your time in Congress, and what do you consider to be the Congressional Black Caucus's biggest achievement? We start with Congressman Nguyen.
Well, personally, being involved in a lot of the energy legislation that we've passed over the last few years to move us toward energy efficiency was a big issue. I was on the Energy and Commerce Commission. I thought that was very significant. I mentioned the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act. Being a part of that was also a major contribution. But also some things that didn't happen in the halls of Congress that I'm particularly proud of. I was able, because I was in Congress and a leader, to host job fairs to help people actually find jobs and to work with minority businesses and help them get contracts and get opportunities. So there's a broad umbrella that I call helping to create opportunity for people. And that's the thing that I'm most, I guess, I feel best about, because when you're in a position of leadership, you have lots of opportunities. You can utilize those opportunities for your own self-aggrandizement, or you can utilize them to help other folks. And what I tried to do was to help other people move up the economic ladder.
And what about for the Congressional Black Caucus?
I think the caucus's role in shaping, and I take this from a very pragmatic standpoint, in shaping the budgets and the appropriations of the United States government, to making sure that we had spending to help seniors, for example, fighting proposals to privatize Social Security, supporting efforts to expand Medicare and Medicaid, providing health insurance for children, a bill we passed just before I left the Congress. All those are things that I think are very important and ultimately played a major role in helping people.
Okay.
My greatest achievement, I think, flows from the fact that after I had finished organizing the Selma to Montgomery March, President Johnson asked me to be the vice chair of his White House conference to fulfill these rights. And he wanted our White House conference to come up with a legislative approach to the Great Society programs. We did that. When I got in the caucus, when I became chair, I was pleased to construct what we call the first constructive alternative budget for the Congressional Black Caucus.
Explain what that is.
That is a budget that covered not just the concerns of black people, but all people. And it proved that year to be the best budget before the Congress. It was a Reagan year. The best budget before the Congress, documented by the think tanks of the country, which said this is the best budget with respect to tax relief. It gives more in tax relief than Reagan did, and he had given $750 billion to the wealthy few, but this gave it to low and moderate income people who, having the money, spent, and who spending expanded business. It gave us a surplus at that time of $750 billion, $2.7 billion at a time when Reagan was giving us a $2.3 trillion deficit in order to do what he wanted to do. The bottom line is the caucus has repeated that constructive alternative budget ever since. As a consequence, the people of conscience in the Congress have a benchmark. And that's the thing I like most about it.
A nice legacy that
Yes.
they left. All right. Well, thank you to both of you. This was a wonderful conversation, and I thank the students of the Congressional Youth Leadership Council for their excellent questions. And of course, I also want to thank each of the former members of Congress that we had here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we appreciate the help we received from the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation as well. This webcast will be archived on the websites of the Lou Frey Institute at loufrey.org and the U.S. Association of Former Members of Congress at usafmc.org. Our next webcast is on Wednesday, March 24th, and we will be focusing on the relationship between the House and the Senate. We hope you all will join us for what will certainly be another very interesting program. Thank you, and goodbye.